welcome to the Film Fan Club Show. I'm Sam Carrico. Boy, I don't know about you guys, but I'm in a really good mood this week because here in Oklahoma, we're officially no longer under a state of emergency because of coronavirus. Yeah, for the first time since March 2020, the state government here repealed its emergency declaration. The city of Tulsa took away its mask mandate. I just woke up one morning and coronavirus was no longer an issue. Yeah, at least that's what the local politicians tell me, and we all know they're never to be wrong. But the vaccines are flowing. We're playing with house money. A lot of people have been actually going back to the movie theaters. Box offices have been seeing good returns lately. This new movie that came out, Demon Slayer, it made $21 million its opening weekend. And then the following week, it beat Mortal Kombat at the theater, which also did really well. Yeah, this movie is an anime. It's an anime movie. And the people are so excited to get back to the theaters, they'll actually pay to go see an anime, which is crazy. Forget Hot Girl Summer at the beach, it's Weeb May at the movies. No, but speaking of new movies, Warner Brothers is going full steam ahead with the next Superman reboot. Did you guys hear about this? This time they're looking for a black actor to play Superman, and honestly, I'm all for it, seeing how they already nailed the white version of the character in Man of Steel and Justice League. They can't go wrong. Meanwhile, we also got our first look at the new Pam and Tommy movie with images of Sebastian Stan and Lily James in character. Yeah, they're playing Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson, respectively. Pam Anderson, famously, on more Playboy magazine covers than anybody else, and Mamma Mia 2 actress Lily James playing her here. I'm really excited for this movie. For the plot. Other movies, in production soon, an American remake of the Oscar winner, Another Round. No, yeah, the original European film with Mads Mikkelsen was Best International Film at the Oscars this year, and now Leo DiCaprio has the rights to the remake. The first film being a witty critique of drinking culture. I thought it was really good. I saw it after the Oscars, and I'm sure that will totally land here in the United States. A country where we see Wolf of Wall Street as something to aspire to. It's not been looking all good for Hollywood, though. The Oscars, like I said, were 2 weeks ago. We did a very special breakdown here on the channel that the awards itself had the lowest television ratings in the show's history. Just under 10 million people tuned in April 25th, compared to just 7 years ago when the show brought in more than 40 million. It's almost like a bunch of maskless celebrities in designer clothing patting themselves on the back isn't the most relatable television in the middle of a pandemic. But there is some good news, guys. The new Game of Thrones spin-off has officially started filming. Yeah, House of the Dragon. They released the first images of the first couple weeks of shooting featuring Olivia Cook and others in character. This is a spin-off about the Targaryens before the events of Game of Thrones. Little is known about the plot outside of that, but one thing's for sure, this show will probably wrap up before the next book comes out. Okay, we've got a great show for you lined up. Later on, we're going to be talking about whether or not woke culture is truly ruining Disney World, but first, I brought on a Twitch streamer to talk about whether or not the new Mortal Kombat movie lives up to its games. Let's get right to it. Okay, he's the host of the Gaming with Gusiach podcast, and you can find him on Twitch at Gusiach. Gustavo Oguin is with us. Hey, Gustavo.
Hey, Sam. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I thought that you'd be kind of the perfect guest to bring on for this. We're talking about Mortal Kombat. And I find your kind of journey a little bit interesting because you and I both have a TV news background. I've always kind of done a little bit both here and there, YouTube and TV news. But you started doing stuff as like a reporter for local news. And then you transitioned into the Twitch scene and then started your podcast. And then now that's kind of what you focus on. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey? And then obviously, like a lot of people, like what do you make of these changing media landscapes?
Yeah, for the most part, like I used to be a YouTube kid where I'd make funny videos and stuff like that. And then I'm like, wait, I need to get into news. So I used YouTube to put my reel together, went into news. And of course, we both know it centers around storytelling. And I really love that aspect of it. And at some point I was like, hey, I don't want to be in news anymore, but I do love the fact, hey, I could use these platforms on my own to tell stories more about video games and like bringing on doctors that specialize in like telehealth and stuff like that. So in a way, I don't have that 5 o'clock runtime on local news. I use my Twitch, I use maybe my podcast to talk about, things that we still like to talk about, bring on guests, do interviews. So I'm using those skills I did in news just in a way that is more interesting to me. Kind of like what you're doing. You have this show about movies and everything going on. And I'd love to see that just because since we're both in news, we're still using the skills that we had. And now anybody can create content, which is the best part about all of this.
What do you think? What do you make of the? There's obviously such an appetite for that, but also, what was so appealing about Twitch particularly to you? Because obviously, I use YouTube a lot primarily, and then I see you've had great success on Twitch, and then the podcast. But what is it about Twitch and then gaming for you?
For the most part, gaming has been kind of my bread and butter in terms of what I do outside of work or what I do when I like to relax. I've been gaming since PlayStation 1. That was the first console I've owned, but I played Super Nintendo, stuff like that, and it's just stayed with me. And I've seen how, I don't know why, but it looks like the Twitch landscape yearns for people to go out there. And I kind of just fell into it. I'm like, well, I like video games and I have a presence on camera from my work. I'm like, well, let's see how this goes. And it's worked out really fun. I've had like a pretty small following, but it's consistent. And that's all that really matters. I'm not trying to be the next ninja or anything like that, because that's how you get burned out. But it's been really fun. And it's also shown it's just like hanging out with people. That's what I see. And it's like having the people at your house that you used to playing PlayStation 1 without internet, but now they just so happen to be in the chat box or chat room on Twitch, which is a lot of fun.
And especially for our, I mean, it was happening already before coronavirus, but like now in a world where everybody's separated inherently, to kind of get that connectivity with other people, it like creates the perfect landscape for that.
Yeah, and especially since I live away from home in California, video games has been a great way for me to connect with a lot of my friends. A lot of them don't enjoy playing like the games like Warzone and stuff like that, but they enjoy just hanging out, for a couple of hours, talking, playing video games, talking trash between each other. And then especially with Twitch, I've actually gotten connected with some friends that were part of the Twitch landscape I don't even know. And they'll just come in and say hi, like, hey man, how you doing? Like, and they're like, here's a subscription, happy birthday, stuff like that. So it's like really simple things, and it helps you connect with people I haven't talked to in a long time. And it's been, at first you get kind of nervous because you're like, what if nobody watches me? But then after that, you just have to get over and be like, oh, well, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this to meet a quota or to become famous. So, and then once you switch that mindset, it's a lot more fun, and I recommend at least try it once.
Well, transitioning gears a little bit, you do like you're talking. I brought you on because you're the video game guy, and Mortal Kombat's coming out, and I wanted to touch on this briefly. But like, what is your general impression of video game movies as a whole? Like, what is the previous track record been for video game movies in your opinion?
So that anybody that plays video games and sees the video game you love being made into a movie, you automatically cringe because you most likely know it is going to be a terrible movie, which is kind of unfortunate because they've been constant redos, constant remakes of these video game movies. And I don't know what the formula is, but they can't seem to get it right unless they go the Mortal Kombat route, where it's meant to be a cult classic, where they do it low budget and they don't try to live up to what Hollywood, expectations, where it needs to be a 6-piece Marvel movie. So I think if they approach it the right way and you go in with the mindset of, hey, this is a video game movie, don't expect an Oscar-winning nominee, it'll be fine. But it's when you get your hopes up and you're like, they're gonna finally get this video game movie right, then that's when things go sideways. So I always kind of approach it with like a cautious mindset. I'm like, let's see how this goes, rather than, all right, this is gonna be my next favorite movie.
I feel like that's kind of a good rule of thumb too, because a lot of people, I remember back in the day, whenever I was seeing movies a lot more frequently, and obviously we could go to the theaters at the time, Warcraft came out, and a lot of people were they're like, bro, this is going to be like Lord of the Rings, just you wait, and I go in and it's like, it's fun, but because I had that expectation of like, this is going to be the next great epic medieval like type of thing, and then I think I didn't see it, but Assassin's Creed, they're like, bro, Michael Fassbender's in this is going to be like Macbeth or some shit, and I'm like, I heard it was very disappointing. So you touched on it briefly. Were you talking about the cult classic status of the previous Mortal Kombat or the new one? And then what are the big differences between the two that you see?
I think the first one is definitely a cult classic. If you talk to anybody and you say it's a bad movie and they like that movie, they get offended just because they'll tell you, no, it's supposed to be bad. And that kind of justifies everything about that movie. So people really like it. The second one, unfortunately, I refused to watch just because I knew it was going to be a terrible movie. So I'm like, all right, I'll watch the first one. And then I just watched the new one last night. Mm-hmm. And the main differences I could tell is the first one clearly established, hey, this is a tournament. This is Mortal Kombat. This is the game you grew up playing. Just straight up fights between characters. Right. The new one that just came out, they tried to build like a backstory. They tried to build character development and kind of added some, I think 35 minutes of backstory that wasn't really needed. Mm-hmm. And then there was never a formal tournament. So I was like, all right, this was a weird turn. And it just goes to show, depending on who directs it, how different each one will be. But it's not a great movie, but I did enjoy watching the new one just because 2021 graphics are a lot better than 1995. So.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Well,
the fight scenes are actually choreographed. So I'm like, perfect.
well, that kind of leads into what I was talking. Obviously, there's a lot of great fight scenes, but the story, it seems kind of bare. What are some of the pros and cons and like the challenges of taking this particular video game? Because I can see how you would do something like maybe Assassin's Creed or some other video or even a Grand Theft Auto and make that into a movie because it seems like it has more of a story per se. I'm not very familiar with the Mortal Kombat series, so but what are some of the challenges of adapting that game particularly to the big screen?
So I think the biggest thing, especially with this movie or series, is for the most part, this is a 2D fighter. So you fight on this plane. There is no world outside of the screen that you're playing with Mortal Kombat. And I think they have to take that, 2-minute fight scene and then create a giant world around that to last, 2 hours on a movie. And I think, like you mentioned, with Warcraft, Assassin's Creed, that world's already built. You don't need to really add much to it. This one, you're basically like, all right, how are we going to tell a story from only fights? Like, that's the only story Mortal Kombat really has going for it. So I think, obviously, how you go about it, the two movies took really different approaches. But when it comes to trying to make a fight game a movie, it's really hard to make sure you get everything right. Get the characters right, get the powers right, get the story right, because you have to make it yourself. There's nothing you can really go off.
It is better than the 1995 one?
I would say yes. Other people would disagree. Like I mentioned, a couple of the action stars they have in there do their own stunts and do their own martial arts and everything like that. So they don't have to keep switching, do tight shots and stuff like that. They could have a fight scene run on its own for 15 seconds where the same actor is fighting each other. And the previous one, it was a lot of tight shots, a lot of like working around the fact that these people can't fight. So I really love the fact that they actually included legit choreography, martial arts in it. And I watch a lot of foreign fighters, like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, stuff like that. And it fit really well with that genre. So I thought they did a great job. Even though it's not, a 10 out of 10 movie, I thought they did a great job bringing back a genre that everyone loves, nostalgia. So I thought it was a win in my book.
Well, I like whenever somebody knows what they're going for and they just try to really excel at that thing. So they know that this isn't going to be, Macbeth or something incredibly thorough like that. But they like the fight scene. I just finished rewatching the scene where they're fighting the invisible lizard, and I just remember that particular sequence and a couple of other of the fight sequences for a game that is like a movie based on a game that's just a 2D fighter. They were able to make that very inventive with the cinematography and the choreography. And then also I appreciated, now I understand that the video game kind of requires this, but just the diversity in the cast and how they didn't shy away from characters speak Japanese, characters speak Chinese, and I think there's an Australian character. It's a very diverse cast.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think that's one thing that needed to change from the 1995 version, because Raiden, the Lord of Thunder, was white. Every other character, I think even Kung Lao was I don't know if he was exactly, or he might have been whitewashed, or there was only 1 or 2 Asian characters I remember from the 1995 version. This one, like you said, they have a Japanese person, they have a Chinese person, they have black, they have everything in between, playing the characters that they should be, speaking their languages, and then also letting those characters fight in that traditional style way that they that they shoot these kind of movies in in Eastern Asia for the most part, which I really appreciated. So the diversity of the cast, A+. Like you said, adding dimensions to the fight scenes and adding some suspense to it, also A+. So I think these are some of the necessary changes that need to be made, and I'm glad that they did it.
And what do you make of this rating too? I mean, I don't know, are the Mortal Kombat games rated M? Because this was really brutal at times. There was blood. What did you make of that? And then who is this movie? Is it made for kids? Is it made for everybody? Who is this movie made for?
I think this is made for the people that are just right before they could watch a rated R movie, like 15 to 17, because if you're that age, you've seen stuff like this. Like no matter how much your parents try to shield you from it, you've seen it. But it was funny because I was watching it with my girlfriend, and when Kung Lao puts his hat on the ground, like his signature move to saw the person in half, she was like, I was not expecting that. And for a second, I forgot fatalities and this brutal violence exists within the game, because the new movie tried to build that backstory. Like there's this one scene I wrote down just for my notes where they're at the restaurant, or they're out, and Sub-Zero comes on, he brings up all the water and just starts throwing it.
Yeah.
And there's this guy just drinking a soda and he just gets destroyed, like his head gets taken off. And I was like, oh shoot, like I forget that Mortal Kombat has this violence. So I'm glad that it wasn't everywhere, but whenever they ended a fight, they used that as the ending. And of course they had to use the cheesy lines like finish him, fatality, and stuff like that. So I loved it, even though it wasn't exactly what I was expecting.
Yeah, and then there's one where when they defeat the lizard, he rips his heart out and he says, Kano wins or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, stuff like that is just so perfectly cheesy, but it's like, this movie shows a clear appreciation for the fan base, which I really like, in a world where I feel like there's a lot of movies that try so hard to appeal to everybody, they almost leave their fans out. And this movie, I feel like as somebody who hasn't seen the previous Mortal Kombat movies or played the games, this film feels like it makes a very direct effort to like include the fans and make sure that they feel like, I don't know, just kind of the experience that Marvel fans get after all this buildup.
Yeah, especially with the way they introduce every character. They kind of introduce it like Marvel characters because, everyone knows who Spider-Man is, but if he hasn't been in the movie yet,
right,
Spider-Man's first appearance is a grand appearance. It's a slow-mo spin-off like shot so they could show all of him. And every time they introduced a new Mortal Kombat character, I was just like, oh, that's Kung Lao. Oh, that's Jax, because I know these characters and they have that nostalgia feel. So like you said, they're catering to the fans that they know these characters, that they know these fighters. And that kind of helps, build upon the movie. And like I said, even though you haven't seen it, it's still pretty cool to see how they do it differently than, a traditional action movie might do it. Though, then again, it did feel like I was watching Fast and the Furious at some parts of this movie, just the way that it was shot and how it's scripted.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's definitely some other influences. I mean, again, whenever you have kind of a bare, like, groundwork, I don't want to say bare groundwork because I feel like true Mortal Kombat, but a 2D action fighting video game to work off of, you kind of have to like fill that out with some other tropes and whatnot. What do you see as being, this is obviously released on HBO Max in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. It is in theaters too, and I think it's done pretty well in theaters considering it's also available on HBO Max. But how do you see the studio measuring success for this movie, and what's the likelihood of getting to see more in this particular universe without getting like rebooted or something?
The great part is that they set it up really well where they didn't introduce everyone's favorite character, which is Johnny Cage, and they show the poster at the end. People were upset because they would watch the movie and they would respond, before it's over, of course. And they're like, where the hell is Johnny Cage? Like, Johnny Cage isn't in this. This is a terrible movie. So I think they did it really well in terms of, we bridged that, we gave you what you wanted, just tune into the next movie to make sure you get this person, you get to see them in action. And for success, the fact that you could tell it didn't have the ultimate budget, you can tell that they didn't use everything to their advantage. I think the success, especially now that it's on HBO Max, is just how many people watch this. Like, because now that they're breaking it up between box office and home viewing, it's making it a little bit more complicated, at least in my head, how they measure success. But as long as it doesn't get below a 50% like on Rotten Tomatoes or fan sites, I think that's a win, a huge win for this movie.
Gustavo Olguin, you want to take another second to let us know where we can find you online? And of course, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, of course. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Gooseyotch. And of course, I have my Gaming for Gooseyotch podcast that I do every week. Revamped it a little bit. So first new episode, I'm going to be doing this video format kind of like you do starting next Friday. Looking forward to it. And yeah, man, thanks for bringing me on. This was a lot of fun.
And finally, if removing things like sex trafficking and racism ruins your theme park experience, I don't think I'm the one being a snowflake. 2 weeks ago, a self-described Christian conservative named Jonathan Van Boskirk wrote an op-ed in the Orlando Sentinel lashing out against recent changes at Disney World. The Magic Kingdom recently updated their Pirates of the Caribbean and Splash Mountain rides. Pirates of the Caribbean removing the infamous Wench for a Bride scene, and Splash Mountain replacing the problematic Song of the South characters with more inclusive counterparts from the recent Princess and the Frog film. And this did not sit well with little Jonathan. Quote, "The parks are less fun because immersion and thus the joy is taking a back seat to politics," Van Boskirk wrote, later adding that an immersive experience should not be sacrificed on the altar of political correctness and appeasing the Twitter mob. But did the woke Twitter mob exist in 1997? That's the year Disney altered the Pirates ride, so the pirate characters who were previously chasing women around the village are now chasing them for their food, changing the implication from rape to theft, which ruins all the fun, I know, Jonathan. But what about in 2006? That's when they made further changes to Pirates of the Caribbean, updating it to include new characters like Captain Jack, Barbossa, Davy Jones, and others. At the time they did it because those new characters were more recognizable, and it makes sense to advertise to the new movies. More kids today probably recognize Princess and the Frog than Song of the South too. So what's so different about changing the characters in Pirates of the Caribbean and changing the characters from Splash Mountain? I can't quite put my finger on it. And while we're at it, can we dispel this notion that changing wenches being sold at an auction to female pirates is somehow less realistic? Real-world pirates, yes, while being a male-dominated culture, included a surprising number of women in their ranks. Anne Bonny, Mary Read, Cheng Xiao, to name a few. I feel like if real-world immersion at Disney World was what you were really after, you'd know that. And by the way, I find it very telling, Jonathan, that given the choice between two potentially historically accurate portrayals of women in pirate culture, you find yourself more comfortable with the one that depicts her as a sex slave. But probably the most egregious offense was little Jonathan's utter contempt for the Disney employees who work so hard to make sure that he enjoys his theme park visit. The company recently made changes to the wardrobe policy for cast members, allowing them to have different hairstyles, paint their fingernails, wear jewelry, have facial hair, and some tattoos. But Van Boskirk argues, quote, "I'm not traveling across the country and paying thousands of dollars to watch someone I don't know express themselves." No, Jonathan, you're paying for a fucking ride. One that you have complete and total access to through your privilege, yet you're still complaining about. And I'm not even against complaining about Disney. Let's just complain about something real. A 2018 CBS report found that 1 in 10 Disneyland employees had experienced homelessness recently. Last October, the Daily Mail reported that motels in Orlando, Florida, near Disney World are practically filled with former park employees with nowhere to go. If you find any of that less offensive than feminists or some shit taking over theme parks, I'm not being woke. You're dreaming, man. Okay, that's our show. I'd like to send a special thank you to Gustavo Olguin, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you, folks.